Hello, Key Stage 3, how's it going? Today I've got to talk you through the task for week 11, which leads on from last week's task, which was the panoramic photograph that we took. So if you didn't do that task last week, don't worry, okay, because you could potentially do that and then move on to this task as well. But if you've done that task already, you're in a very strong position now. So I'm going to share my screen with you. I'm going to talk you through a description of the task. I'm going to show you some artworks to inspire you, and then I'm also going to show you some photos and some clips, some time-lapse clips that should show you how I interpreted the task, just as an example. So let me make this full screen. Here is the task description. Something very similar to this, if not identical, will be on Satchel 1 at the beginning of the week. We're going to be setting tasks for 7, 8, and 9 on Monday, and they will all be due on Friday. But of course, you can submit that earlier if you want to. So here's the task. Develop your panoramic photograph into a colourful design for a public mural featuring multiple figures. And you can see examples on the right by Sura, Hockney, and a panoramic photograph that we used as an example last week. So as part of this task, you should make changes to the composition that you decided on with your panoramic photograph, or combine elements of several panoramas. So you could take two that you did and put them together. You should respond to the artists that I'm going to show you and that you're going to be showing during your lessons, perhaps in their use of colour or in the way they applied whatever medium they were working in, or something else, okay? You could think about how this task could be used to reflect upon or even commemorate the events of this year. So it could link to the theme of lockdown. That could be interesting. And I think given the themes of isolation, of being together in groups, all those things link really nicely into this task. So it could work very well. You can use any combination of media, obviously, whatever you're comfortable doing. As this is a competition, you should play to your strengths. You could do an incredibly beautiful, detailed pencil drawing, concentrating on tone and mark making, or you could do a watercolor. You could get some acrylic paints out, and you could do something with pastels or some sort of collage. It's really up to you. It just has to be this sort of shape, panoramic, wide, wider than it is taller, and it has to feature several figures, and it has to be based on your panoramic photograph or several panoramic photographs. So hopefully that explains the task, but I'm going to show you some pictures now that should inspire you. So if you're not understanding it, don't worry. Okay, so putting several figures into a composition in a way that kind of tells a story is something that's been going on for hundreds of years in art, okay? And in fact, if you look way back to the 16th century, that is the 1500s, okay? Raphael, who was a very famous Renaissance painter, made this amazing piece of work called the School of Athens, and it was actually a big mural or a fresco, which is a painting on plaster inside the Pope's special palace in the Vatican in Rome. And you can see here lots of figures. They all represent different things. They represent important figures from science, from philosophy. They're all talking to each other and interacting with each other, and it's really complex. Basically, things like this used to be the equivalent of cinema in the day, because people would spend a long time looking at them, and it was the best way of telling a story, because cinema and so many other things like radio and television hadn't been invented. Here's a later example, but you can see the similarities between Raphael in the 16th century and Philippe de Champagne in the mid-17th century, the 1600s. Similar style, and it stuck around. Here we have an example from a similar time period, but in Spain. This is Velázquez, and he's not painting a scene from mythology. He's actually doing a group portrait of the royal family. And what's really good about this example is that you can see how he's used the scale of the figures to create depth in the composition. What's really cool about this is that if you look right into the middle of the composition, those two figures in the mirror are actually us, the viewers, and they are the king and queen of Spain. So as viewers of this painting, we are encouraged to feel as if we are the king and queen of Spain. And there are, of course, lots of other figures in this painting at various positions forward and back. And that's why it feels so cavernous. Georges Seurat, an impressionist and a neo-impressionist, he invented this technique of pointillism or divisionism, as he called it when he invented it. But what's really cool about this composition is all of the different figures at different distances from us, together but also separate. And this was kind of a comment by Seurat about French society at the time, and that sort of loneliness that comes along with being part of an urban community, being a city dweller. Degas, very famous for his interest in ballet dancers, young ballet dancers. Here we can see the ballet dancers gathered together, rehearsing, perhaps preparing for a performance. But the way that they are dressed in the same costumes, the way that they're hunched together, almost overlapping, merging into one figure, makes them look like they are in a panoramic, a glitched out panorama photo. And I feel like Degas' ballerinas, rehearsing for the same performance every day, wearing the same costumes, kind of working on their own performances, but also thinking about the whole. I don't know, there's definitely some parallel there with our situation at the moment. Anyway, here's a nice example of a proper mural. This is a big painting that would have been in public by Diego Rivera. He was, of course, Frida Kahlo's husband. And this is in the early 20th century now, and we can see how all the different figures in this composition are playing different roles, and they all have different meanings, and they represent different types of people. So there's so much going on here. It's really complex, it's really political, there's symbolism, it's laden with meaning. And then this is Rego. She is late 20th century, she's like 1980s, and she does these kind of really distinctive stumpy sort of figures. And here we see lots of repetition, overlapping, and also an indistinct kind of abstract background, which sort of creates the impression of things happening throughout time as well as happening throughout space. So it's still this device of telling a story through putting lots of figures together, which is very cool. And then finally, Hockney, early 21st century, so he's in the 2000s around there, and an old man now, but still making very exciting, vibrant work. He was very interested for a period of time in very wide perspectives, in distorting and warping perspective. And you can see here he's messing around, getting lots of different figures in his studio, positioning them further away, further back, overlapping them, putting different levels of detail into the figures. So here's another person that you might be inspired by. Now, what did I do? Okay, what did your art teacher, one of them anyway, what did they do? Well, I gotta tell you, I had fun with the panorama. I struggled a little bit with the mural, but I gave it my best shot, and I'll talk you through my process now, hopefully in a way that helps you to create a panoramic mural of your own. Oh, I forgot to mention Kerry James Marshall, because I added this last minute because it popped into my head and I thought, oh, Kerry James Marshall is amazing, and he does big scenes, again, really complex, full of lots of different figures representing different things, and also lots of background details that tell us lots of things, lots of messages. Those of you who looked at Critchley as part of the Black British Artists Portrait Week will recognise one of his paintings in the top right there. I think it's a Dizzy Gillespie related title or something. Anyway, moving on. Okay, so these are the two pictures that I decided to combine for my piece of work. Now, what I've done is, I'm going to stop sharing this for a second. I actually created a few little time lapses to show how this came together. So I'm going to open those now. Oh, it doesn't seem to be letting me do that. I'll just share my whole screen. So you should be able to see my whole screen now. And I'm going to go down and I'm going to, there we go. I'm going to show the video like this. Right, so as you can see, this is a little album on my iPhone. And I'm going to go through these videos one by one, pausing and talking about them. Okay, so to begin with, here I am, and I'm starting a pencil drawing based on my photograph. You can see in the top left hand corner there's my laptop. I'm looking at it and I'm referencing the picture. I started very, very lightly, so lightly you can barely see the pencil marks, and now I'm going back over those. I'm tweaking the shapes and refining them, and now I'm adding a little bit of background. But just to play that, just to show you that one more time, here it is. Okay, and that's how the picture looked when I finished with it. You can see the figures. They're pretty loose. You can't really see many of the features. As you can see, my features are just splodges, because to be honest with you, I couldn't see the features either. So drawing like eyelashes and teeth and lips was a bad idea. So I just kept it very simple. And if I saw a dark splodge where I knew an eye should be, I put a dark splodge there. Okay, so you should do the same. Now I'm adding in watercolor. Now, what I wanted to do was create a really vibrant Hockney-esque sort of background, very exaggerated colors, but also very flat. And I didn't manage to get them very flat because I'm not very good at watercolors, but I did manage to get a pretty solid color in there. And I went to it for one of my favorite color combos, which is a kind of a cool green and a kind of a cool red, kind of turquoise and pink sort of vibe, but more like a dark green and a red, really. Anyway, there we go. I added in my background colors. I let it dry a little bit, and then I started putting in colors on the figures. I added the lighter colors first with my watercolors, and then I added some darker ones on top for the most part. And again, I'm trying to cover as much as I can, but as you can see, there are several little bits of white paper poking through. There's a bit of tissue up there at the top because I made a mistake. And as you know, with watercolor, if you make a mistake, you can just get a bit of tissue and dab it to draw the paint off. That's what it looked like at that stage. Apologies for the slightly blurry photo, but I was trying to photograph it from some distance away to avoid shadows. The next thing I did was I got some color pencils and I added them on top of the watercolor. I found this is a really good way to make watercolor seem a little bit less gappy. So I was filling in gaps, and I was also adding in sort of other colors to make the colors a little bit more interesting. So I added some pink into the red. I added some yellows onto the background. I tightened up the shape of the unusual shape of the frame with a ruler, and that was my finished piece. So I'm going to stop this video now. I'm going to go back to the presentation. Hopefully it will let me. Yeah. And just quickly go through those pictures again. Light underdrawing, you know, it doesn't have to be amazing. You could use some tracing if you want to, or projection, whatever suits you. Blocked in some color, added some detail with some color pencils. Bish, bash, bosh, done. Right. So that's the task for this week. It will be on Tutorial 1. We'll be describing it during the lesson. I'm really excited to see what everybody does for this. And there is the slightest hint, the slightest possibility that we might use this mural design to create a new mural in school. There is a mural at Franklin House at the moment that has seen better days, that needs replacing. But to be honest with you, it all depends on the quality we get. So if you blow our socks off with an amazing mural design that commemorates this time in West London Free School history, it's possible that we might realize it and make it into a real mural. No promises, depends on the quality, but that's just something exciting to motivate you, okay? Amazing. Cool work so far, and I look forward to seeing what you produce this week. Bye-bye.